Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to One Day Today. We are on episode 35 already. It's kind of crazy. I don't even know how long we've been doing this, but we've had so many amazing people just share their stories, share their gifts, share their unique genius. And it's been really, it's been an amazing experience for me just to hear so many perspectives and so many people who just have distinguished in themselves something bigger and it's something that makes them want to contribute to us all. And there's actually a quote today that I heard someone say, and it feels relevant. And it says, maybe your authentic self is more than you realize. And it's something that's kind of an inquiry I've kind of sat on because it's so much true. It's so true in my experience, in the ways that I've been inauthentic, you know, from that perspective and that point of view, when I'm in shame or in guilt for things I'm avoiding, I don't think that if I'm being authentic, that there's something that's bigger than I realize is possible, because I'm just thinking in such a small world and a small frame. That's what's so humbling about this stage, is people sharing it just from everyone has a different place in a circumstance they're coming from, a different, whether it's a race, religion, creed, just what they're up to. The uniting factor that everyone goes through is just that experience of themselves, facing something, some pain, some fear, some trial, some tribulation. And it's always on the other side of that they discover something in themselves it is them, but it's also much bigger than them. And it just inspires me to have a space to have people share their story. So I'm really excited about our guest today. I'm going to bring in and say hello to Matthew, our co-host. How's it going today, Matthew?
Doing pretty good, brother, man. How about yourself?
I'm well. I'm feeling very good today. I've had a very productive month, and I'm having been facing a lot that I've been putting off. So it's been a very transformative and exciting peripheral in front of me right now, and I'm feeling good.
Holding yourself accountable to your own integrity is a very powerful experience in my experience.
I'm learning every day.
Yeah, right? Aren't we all? And I love that quote. Like, maybe your authentic self is bigger than what you think it is. That's something that like I have had been playing with for a long time. Um, and it's funny, like I don't even know many people who actually ask themselves the question, what am I? Like it's just kind of assumed, well, I'm a person, or I'm a human being, or I'm, whatever my personality is, or I'm what, I am. Like just asking that question, I feel like is one of the most powerful line of inquiries that I've ever come across. And I just encourage anyone and everyone out there to really kind of dive into it and ask yourself the question, what are you really?
Mm.
Is there even an I?
Absolutely. I'm really, really excited about both our guests today. I have the pleasure of calling both of them my friend, but they're two of the most brilliant people I've ever met, and I'm really excited to have both of them share. But on that note, let's welcome Paul Zohav.
Oh,
Hello, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, very excited to have you.
Tell me when to begin.
Well, I'm glad you asked. The stage is yours, Paul.
Well, my name is Paul Zohav, and I live in Tucson, Arizona, where now it's only 107 degrees. How about that? That's summer in Arizona. I'm 70 years old, and my contribution lies in the area of communication, love, and relationships. And I begin that journey perhaps about 30 years ago. I left Twin Oaks, a commune I'd been living on. Yes, I qualified as a hippie in those years. I received a master's degree in counseling from the University of Virginia. And I started out to be a domestic violence counselor. And after a few years, I understood that I preferred to prevent it rather than treat it and deal with the aftermath of domestic violence and abuse. However, I came face to face with a challenge, a personal challenge. I still had a personal belief from childhood when I was 5 years old, when I concluded as a brilliant 5-year-old that no one cares about me and no one cares what I want. And believing that, I coped by retreating into myself, reading books, and watching a lot of TV. I gave up connecting with others because I didn't believe the connection was there. After all, I was on my own. I would have said to myself, why bother? No one cares. And even knowing this, the young worldview still colors and shapes my life to this day, and especially when I'm not paying attention. And then, when I was a young teenager, I gave up on God as well. I felt outraged by the Holocaust and the murder of most of my Jewish family and others by the Nazis in World War II. I took on being angry with God, wondering, how did God permit this to happen? I would go into temple to rekindle my righteous anger. I would read scriptures to renew my accusations at God, the God that I had imagined myself God to be as a teenager. And this went on for the next 30 years, about until my 40 years. So here I was in my 40s, surviving, largely disconnected from others, and spiritually disconnected and bitter towards God. Kind of an ouch. Something had to give, and that something was me. First, I realized that between me and God, I was doing most of the suffering. I was tired of being angry. I decided to stop suffering. Secondly, I realized that my image of God was very young and immature. I chose to replace my child's view of God, sitting up there on a throne, judging everything, and accountable for all that happens down here on earth. I placed the responsibility for the Holocaust and for human suffering where it belongs, to us humans. We are the perpetrators. We are responsible. We are the Nazis. If you pay attention to the newspaper, even today, you'll see plenty of evidence for that. It's really up to us to recreate our world, lives, and our living. At this point in my life, I took a break from domestic violence counselor. I chose to become a professional chaplain. I received a master's degree in religious studies. Along the way, I remarried, spent a year studying in Israel, and took powerful personal growth and development courses given by Landmark Worldwide. Basically, I grew up. I got to know myself as I had never known myself to be. By the way, I highly recommend taking personal growth and development courses offered by Landmark Worldwide. Some 3 million people around the world have done what I've done since 1991, and I invite you to check it out for yourself. So, at this point, I'm about 50 years old. I followed my new spiritual path and relationship with God and humankind. I was ordained and ministered to those in hospitals, nursing homes, retirement communities, psychiatric hospitals, and eventually became a hospice chaplain. But what about my early commitment to families? I had never really forgotten my commitment to families experiencing domestic violence and abuse. And all during that period of my life, I never stopped asking, what do the perpetrators of domestic violence and abuse and their families need to know that would make a difference? And in 2009, my answer was marriage and communication. I'd come to understand that many of us have marriages utterly lacking in communication skills. Why was this? Well, most of us had received the traditional 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic. The 4th R, the skills of relationship and communication, were, and are to this day, utterly missing. Our children were and are still graduating high school, able to read, write, and figure, possibly, and utterly aware of how to communicate and get along with others. A recipe for disaster. And some 10 years ago, I became a marriage and communication counselor and started up my business, Marriage and Communication Coaching. Today, I coach nearly and newlyweds who want to communicate in a way that leaves them feeling safe, honored, and respected. Veteran couples and families experiencing a lack of good quality communication and relationship skills. Couples who are confronted with infidelity, alcoholism, abuse, and other life crises. I teach all who come to me the skills, insights, and best practices for relationships and marriage that grow to last a lifetime. I'm writing a book, Marriage and Communication, a guide to communication and relationships. and I'm developing a 4th R communication-based curriculum for schools. Lastly, I offer to speak by person in Zoom to any community, congregation, business, or civic organization anywhere in the world that is looking for an inspirational speaker. And I guarantee that within 30 minutes, your communication will never be the same ever again. Do I ever hear my voice wondering, does anybody care? Do I matter? Should I bother? Yes, I do, and simply do not pay attention. I go about my business of making a difference in people's lives and invite those voices, old voices, to stop by and then go on their way. And Abram thought I should share some quotes that inspired me. And the first one is by George Bernard Shaw, who wrote, quote, "I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing on to the future generations." And every once in a while, I look at a poem by Donna Markova, and it's entitled, "I will not die an unlived life. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes on to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit." Today, some 70 years into my life journey, I imagine God is smiling. My name is Paul Zohav. You can find me at marriageandcommunication.com. I look forward to meeting you. Abram?
Paul, thank you. That was so powerful, my friend. That was hearing you share your story. I've never heard it, really, spelled out like that. And I always, whenever I talk to friends about you, I always say you are a master of language and you deconstruct reality with your words. And whenever we have a phone conversation, we actually talked earlier today, I enjoy the playground in which you use words and language. And I wonder, where did you discover the power of communication and language? Is there a moment that stands out that you saw your own power?
I think it grew very slowly because I wasn't paying attention to others. I paid a lot of attention to what I read. I read probably at this point thousands of books, novels mostly, science fiction, historical fiction, biographies, and I always looking how they said what they said. And over the years, I've continued my inquiry into language. I mean, for example, the most recent thing I was writing this morning is, I call it the perils of the word should. I think a lot of us are uncomfortable on some level when we say, I have to, I need to, I should, I ought to. And I finally got it after listening, that there's a hidden conversation that we don't say out loud, or else. That's there. I have to lose weight, or else I'll die. I should be a better listener, or I'll lose my relationship. I need to exercise, or I'll get fat. So what I've noticed most recently is that the conversations of should, need to, have to, gotta, ought to, and how unawarely we speak these things, yet we hear the other thing too, or else. And I'm sharing that. I was starting to share that today. And I have many other tidbits. If we have time and it fits in, I'll add a few more. Basically, I see communication as invitation rather than confrontation. When we tend to react to one another, when we'd rather respond. I mean, reacting is good when we're driving a car and the light turns red. We don't want to think about it. Is this a good day to stop? Too late. In communications, however, we want to stop, pause, and reflect, and then choose our next conversation. And it's as simple as saying, yes, and tell me more. Yes, and can we talk about this in a way that leaves us feeling honored and respected? It's like putting in the clutch, disengaging the engine from my mouth. So don't say something I'm going to regret later. So that's yes, and is an invitation to talk. Using the word seems is an invitation to talk. So I look at communication these days as invitational rather than confrontational. And that's just a sample of kind of where we begin work when I work with couples or working in the schools out there in the world. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely, and I think that's beautiful. Like the awareness of what comes out of our mouth. And I mean, I need to, I have to, I got to, and it's, I've very recently kind of made that same shift where I'll be present to when I say I have to do this, I need to do this, and instead saying I get to, and find the gratitude in what I'm doing, and like how that's powerful. And then sometimes a step beyond that is I choose to, even when it's something that maybe is uncomfortable physically, but it's something that makes me grow.
Well, at some point I chose leadership in the world of communication. And if I listen to my smallest, youngest voice, it's why bother? No one cares. Go read a book. And my choice is to not listen to that. To let my leadership and initiative call the shots rather than who my inner 5-year-old would have me be. How much time? Anything, Matthew? Anything you would like to ask?
There's several things. We'll see if we have time for all of them. But that inner 5-year-old you talk about, what brought your awareness to that?
Well, I these days identify it that we all have a noticer, an interpreter, and a coper. We notice a disturbance in the force, to borrow from Star Wars. And at age 5, with the intelligence I had at age 5, I noticed that my mother left me at kindergarten. I have a vivid memory of that. And I have a vivid memory of interpreting that as, well, no one cares what I want. And I coped by withdrawing, reading books, making my sister's life very uncomfortable. She was my younger sister. And being all on my own as far as I could be as a child. So when I coach people, I tend to say, like, what was your disturbance in the force? And how did it color and shape your life? For example, a 70-year-old came to me and she told me 3 times that she has a poor memory. I said, well, she's 70 years old. Maybe she does have a poor memory. And yet when they came for me for coaching, she's been saying I have a poor memory for 70 years. 70 years, colored and shaped by poor memory. And we can imagine she's 7 years old and someone says to her, I've explained this to you 3 times. Why can't you remember? What's wrong with your memory? And that was the disturbance of force for this young woman, who then interpreted as, well, I have a poor memory. And to protect herself from that kind of shitstorm, and to warn me, she always warns people that she has a poor memory. And so she's protected herself and us for 70 years. And we had to deconstruct that to give her some freedom. So I could ask you, anyone who's listening to this, what did you make up as an upset 5-year-old or 4-year-old or younger that is coloring and shaping your adult life today, all these many years later? And that's the beginning of a great growth dialogue for all of us.
Oh, yeah. I don't know where this question is coming from, but it's wanting to be asked for some reason. Have you ever had a chance to resolve that conversation with your mom?
Well, doing the courses at Landmark Worldwide, or now called Landmark Worldwide, part of the, and I encourage people to do this, tell your story, your dramatic story, 50 times, over and over and over again, to someone who's listening. And I found that long before I got to the 50th, my narrative, with all its Sturm und Drang, shredded. I no longer had the energy to repeat it even to myself. And at that point, the narrative fell apart. And I was able to see my mother for who she was and who she was not, and take responsibility that I made it up, even if I was 5 years old at the time. So, and sometimes I have couples I work with, just tell your story over and over again till you're sick of it. And then you get some freedom around it. It's no longer running your life under the threshold of your awareness. It's a fun exercise, if rather uncomfortable after about the 10th repetition.
And well, that's like that word right there, the awareness. That to me feels like the key to it. Like so many people tell their stories so often, but they're not aware that they're telling a story.
Again and again and again, and reliving it, and life filtered by it. And it's pretty easy to deconstruct and recode. That's part of the work I do with the couples. It's all about retraining your noticer, the part that notices the world around you. Always. It's been online since you were born. You never stopped noticing. And your intellect went on board stage by stage, but you never stopped noticing and choosing to respond to what that you noticed. Eventually you figure it out. If you go like this, they pick you up. That's your coping strategy. And when you smile, whether it's gas or not, they giggled. So you learn to smile. And once you become aware of this, you can game yourself into a brand new life.
And I love this conversation because it actually leads off perfectly from where Abram started us at the very beginning with that question of, your authentic self. What are you really?
It takes some work. I mean, unless you're aware of it, it runs you. Do you have it, or does it have you? And with the kind of work, for instance, at Landmark, you get very clear that, unawarely you dealt this mess, and you get to play a new game, the one that leaves you empowered.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact quote. I'm pretty sure it was Einstein, but something to the effect of the mind, or putting the mind in its rightful place as a servant and not the master.
Exactly. I mean, once you notice that you have a noticer, you can program it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time we have, but you say, tomorrow I'm interested in a white Toyota. And your noticer lets you see every single white Toyota in Nashville, and it'll exclude all the others. So it's an eminently programmable mind mechanism. Once you know it, you're free.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautifully said. That's so many things you say are so powerful and so profound, and I'm inspired by how you deconstruct reality. It's our conversations that we have with ourselves and others is really impacts our entire experience of reality, and for better or for worse.
If you live in a world given by people who think life happens to them, then you have a lot of, I'm sorry, it's my fault, I'll try, I wish, and I hope. Conversely, if you live in a world where I am at cause, I happen to the world, then you can be responsible, accountable, you can intend, you can plan and anticipate. It's a radically different world shaped by the language we use. And if we can distinguish our disempowering language, we can choose the other. Don't try, intend. Don't be guilty, be accountable. Don't be ashamed, be responsible. And for sure, you don't get to be sorry. For that, you have to be apologizing. It's all language. Reality is a confection of language.
And this goes right back to what you were talking about should and need, have to. And these are words I never use. Like in my daily conversation, I do not use them at all. To me, to say something should be a certain way is to argue with reality. it is
Or
the
else.
way it is.
Remember,
Or else. Yeah,
add the or else and you can laugh.
yeah, exactly.
Things should be X, Y, Z, or else.
Yeah.
Then
Right.
you can laugh. Literally, it's a contribution of humor when you get the whole conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you so much for sharing that beautiful, just the monologue, but the poems, just sharing yourself. Thank you. You inspire me, and you invoke wonder and awe, and just hearing you talk. So I'm so grateful for you, and thank you for sharing with us. And we're gonna come back with you after we have Lewis, our second guest chair.
Okay. See you soon.
See you in a bit.
Good, Paul.
All right. Thank you, Paul. And thank you all for tuning in with us. This has been a special day. I'm really happy to have both our guests, and I can't wait for Lewis to share. But I want to also take this chance to invite you and encourage you to share on the stage. I want to give you this space to share your unique gift, your unique genius, like who you are. We all benefit from the gift of who you are. And I want to give you a space to express yourself, to be you, and to have an open space where you can be vulnerable and share what brought you here and what do you have to share, because even if you don't even know what it is, and for most of my life I was trying to figure that out, and I mean sometimes it's a day-to-day thing, but you have a gift, and when you show up and share yourself, it's like we all have something to gain. And I want to encourage you. There's a link on the bottom of the screen for signing up. And that's what the stage is here for. It's for you to share your story, and that's part of what our mission is. You know, it's bringing you and I and communities together in joyous celebration, unifying humanity and our diversity to create a better world for us all. All right, now I'm going to invite our second guest. We have Lewis Brantmeyer. Lewis, so glad you're with us, brother. How are you?
It's good to be back, man. Good to see you all.
Absolutely. Good to have you back, man.
You know, I just want to hear you share, man, because I love hearing you talk, and I'm just gonna let you have the stage right now. If you're cool with that. Does that sound good?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, let's do it.
Absolutely.
Lewis, the stage is yours in 3D.
Oh man, I love that. So yeah, I'm Lewis Brantmeyer. I am a heart-centered business development coach, and I'll go more into my intro in just a second, but talking about like what's actually there is very interesting. Like what we really are, authentically. Like what if your authentic self were bigger than what you thought you were? I've always believed, even going back to my days teaching philosophy, that we are more than and other than what we think we are. And in fact, if we think we are something, then we are not that. Always. Which goes very much into the observer or the noticer that the previous guest pointed to so powerfully. And I would venture a little beyond that and say, not just that I'm the impact I have on the individuals around me, not just the net result of my communications, my actions and behavior, but I am all of this. I am everything. After my advanced course, and I also really appreciated landmark education, it was definitely a great beginning to a transformational journey, and I'll never look askew at how it was the gateway drug of transformation for me. Once I sort of got involved there, I was exposed to a massively intricate and subtle and dynamic and beautiful world. So to come to my story, I grew up a socially awkward, anxious, autistically diagnosed sci-fi, that is Star Trek, mainly loving nerd. And through my work, through studying to become actually better in dating and relationships, I grew from there through a brief period as a narcissistic, sociopathic asshole, thinking that power with or power over people was the source of fulfillment and satisfaction, to realizing that and the dramatic and often traumatic cravings of my ego in expanded power sort of realms of dating and relationship, that those were bankrupt, and that really what was necessary, what was needed, was self-love, and beyond that, love of mission, love of purpose, love of the world. We are not merely meant to be loving those who are in our immediate family, immediate friends, the niche for our business, whatever. Who we are is nothing less than love for the entire world, love for all being and all beings. So I went from, as I said, anxious, awkward, through this narcissistic, I called myself Casanova stage. There's some fun, interesting stories to tell about that period, to finally public speaker and coach, public speaker trainer, conscious event producer. I like to say I'll do events until I'm dead and possibly afterwards, because I love it. We had 250 people show up for our Awaken Life Live 2-day event this past weekend. It's been compared to Tony Robbins. And to be totally frank, what takes 3 days to get done in the Landmark Forum gets done in 3 hours flat at Awaken Life Live. And so I spent a lot of time in my journey spiritually bypassing, using the language of integrity, the shifts in speaking, to ignore and or brutalize my heart, the call of my heart, or the emotions that were going on in my body, that were calling not for merely distinguishing and bracketing out and putting to the side, but to actually be felt. We have feelings for a reason, and when we feel them fully, as Shinzen Young says in The Science of Enlightenment, we feel them completely, and who and how we are effortlessly changes. There's no need to be dancing around programming for years and decades saying, no, this upset 5-year-old is still running my life, or I get to hear that tape in my head over and over. Well, what I've discovered is if I feel the feelings, the tape turns off. And the decision that I made, embodied as feelings triggered by a hallucination of past experiences into the environment, suddenly silences. And to quote my own poem from, this is somewhere in that middle period, right? But a series of jigsaw puzzle pieces assemble en masse, merely to draw together and to whisper the divine name of who and what we truly are, which is love, nothing less than love. So, it took some work for me to get from point A through point B in the rocky, crazy period to point C. And I'm always moving, I'm always learning, I'm always growing. I know enough to know that most modalities that I've been exposed to, at least in my personal experience, weren't it completely. It took 3 years, a dramatic change of diet, and a lot of emotional intelligence for even the extremely potent and powerful conversation, which I highly recommend to all to investigate in Landmark, to begin to land in my body and become something that was available for reference and use and distinction and transformation. I found that when you bring multiple modalities together, the individual who's working through and with all of them gets more power, more freedom, more self-expression, more peace of mind than would be possible through any of them particularly, which is the origin of Empowering All Now, or IN, as I like to call it, which reminds us all that God is gracious, because that's the meaning of that name. And my mission there is to access, express, embody, and awaken the highest potential in each and every for the highest good of all, in pursuit of my vision, which is a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, from love, where your unique gifts, your talents, your heart shows up in the world as an instrument in a symphony that we are all meant to play together. And as my current expressions of this, I help heart-centered women, entrepreneurs, and coaches to step into their full voice, power, and authority online and on the stage to effortlessly bring in clients, customers, and income. I also work with men. It was funny recently in my group coaching program. I have like 6 women and this one guy signs up and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not, here to discriminate. In fact, I've been doing a lot of anti-racist and a lot of work to dismantle white, male, heteronormative, ableist, neurotypical privilege, right? And that's just a start, right? I'm doing most of the work in the equity, diversity space first, because nobody taught me this, right? Our previous guest was absolutely right in that we're not taught relationships. We're also speaking in a group of 4 white men right now. We're also not taught to look at how everything from public policy and the political milieu to just the ways in which we perceive ourselves and the many privileges with which we are raised that are so in our blind spots that we never think to consider them. The most dangerous part of white privilege is that we could go for the rest of our lives without considering that our words and our actions and our ways of being and communicating are intrinsically contributing to, through complicit silence, the injustice and the pain and the suffering of people like Trayvon Martin or George Floyd or any of a number of people whose voices are stifled by virtue of us not creating space for those people. So I heard from a course supervisor, I don't know if she was level 2 or level 4 or whatever, but she was very clear to me. She was like, yeah, the landmark, this organization does not address racism. And that conversation is 70% of what Black, Indigenous, and people of other colors deal with most of their lives. So you look around at the demographics in most landmark courses and it's like, oh, I understand why they're not here, because we're not in their world. Until recently, where she, and I know a number of other people, moved and shaked as much as possible the higher echelons of that organization to bring the attention towards that. And I'm kind of that squeaky wheel in the organization I'm taking part in, which integrates transformational learning, like non-linear learning, with emotional and spiritual intelligence, and gives people the power to manifest 6 figures in a day in alignment with their purpose. I know this because one of my best friends has these crazy, amazing stories about his personal transformations and the things that he's accomplished through, as I'm committed to doing, surrendering fully, shutting the fuck up with my ego through feeling and healing whatever's there that is still speaking and resisting, surrender to intuitive divine guidance, moment by moment. So being willing to put my ego to the side, on the altar, anything that I think I am meant to do, anyone that I think I'm supposed to be, being willing to take it away and say, hey, what is love meant to do in this moment? How is love meant to show up through me in this moment? And often it's very crazy. It's very nonlinear. I mean, you think practicing masculine style, linear, rational, afraid of not being predictable in the future style, integrity is challenging. Well, that's the first level. The second level is, how can I flow with a world that is moving through me with a still small voice that may tell me to do things that make absolutely no sense to not only all of my programming, but everything that I might have rationally, using my noticing observer, come up with or invented as a meaning or as a purpose for my life. So anyway, you can see that I'm a little bit on fire with all of this. I love it. I absolutely love dismantling privilege and oppression and systems of power that have stifled voices. I mean, I primarily work with women, and every single one of them has stories of how their voices were silenced, how they were not given space to speak, and unlocking, unleashing, unveiling the incredible beauty and power of their hearts and their unique feminine flow out into the world in such a way that they are able to receive and others are able to receive in a powerful way what is meant to come through them. That's just like, I have the privilege, the pleasure, the honor, the responsibility of being that, removing of the bridle on their expression. And so I do that at my online heart-centered business mastery event and through my coaching. And it was funny, right? When the Black Lives Matter situation started, one of my clients is a Black lesbian, completely out and open about all of this. And, you know, when it happened, when the protests started happening, I noticed, I was like, wait, there's something that I don't know. There's something in my blind spot. There's something to get responsible for. And not as a make wrong, by the way. There's never been a single bone of judgment throughout this conversation in my body for anyone who isn't doing anti-racist or equity or diversity work. All I can say is that I started to look into my blind spots and I started to see disturbing things that I never would have seen in the 120 years that I plan on living on this planet plus, unless I looked there. And it's just been one-on-one conversations with women, with Black, Indigenous, and people of other colors, people of other ethnicities, genders, sexualities, and asking them, wait a second, is this real? Is this something that I just didn't know about? And then yes. All right, well, there's a place where I get to be more love or to love more now. And that's what I'm committed to in the world, is to be the highest expression of love that I am capable of being. And so then it becomes a matter of me honoring the possibility, the opportunity, the responsibility. So, you know, there's an answer, a good answer, and I finally come to it, to the question which started all of this, which is, what am I, right? What is my authentic self? Is it bigger than what I think it is, right? And most of our desires, nay, even those desires that we tend to fall into immediately after attending personal development courses, just like Landmark, and I can tell just from my own story, even the desires that stand out as, this is what I want to invent as a possibility, are conditioned based on our blueprint, based on the programming of teachers, preachers, family, friends, media, and government, who through no fault of their own, stifled, repressed, and pushed down, pushed to the side through that programming, the innate voice of God in our soul, calling us to something more, calling us to something even bigger than our little ego could have ever imagined. So after I did the forum and the advanced course, I spent 2 or 3 years chasing ass and taking names, thinking that the possibility I was living into, the possibility of being Casanova, which I was committed to from an angle, at least, of contribution and service to unsexed, unloved, underappreciated, unliberated, totally leashed when it came to sexuality, women. And yet that whole time I was acting from even more incompletion, because life is an 18-inch journey. Speaking colloquially, right? A lot of us are taller than that, or our body proportions are different, whatever. Life is an 18-inch journey from the head through the emotions to the heart. And once we're here, what we hear is so much different than anything that our mind and our paltry little ego can come up with or imagine or distinguish or decide upon. Decision to cut off from all other options, right? Or choice in the language of Landmark, right? This and this. chocolate, vanilla, choose. Sure, you could choose one or the other, but your ego is actually impacting that choice in a blind spot that you can't see until you've felt all there is to feel. So there is the identity, and the self is the distinction from Landmark. And you know, I've received training from high-level leaders in Landmark for the past 4 years, because it always deserves a seat at the table, 100%. You should do the forum and the advanced course. Well, you should, right? Because cancel clear. Should is not a real thing. But I highly recommend, at the very least, those first 2 courses, because there's nothing like them when it comes to deconstructing the conversations with which we create our lives. Now, when it comes to holistic healing and beginning to speak from a realm that instantaneously has chair fall out of your mouth or manifests healing in the body, that's another order of magnitude. So like, as I was saying, I have a former Landmark seminar leader who's one of my best friends, has been directly sort of training me for about 4 years now. And he's now involved in what we're up to, and he's 100% not a part of the Landmark enterprise anymore, publicly or privately. But the embodied training is available. So it always deserves a seat at the table of transformation, 100%. And yet, there's what I see as the 3 levels of the self. And I'll conclude with this, and then I'll yield the floor, because I've burned enough fire and explosive, you know, sharing of who and what I am and what I'm about. What we say in Earthwaking University, where we put on this Awaken Life Live event, is there's the ideal self, how I want to be perceived, how I think I need to be perceived in order to get love, thinking that it's not intrinsically me, thinking that I need to be worthy of it, that I need to save someone as a hero, or I need to provoke someone as a victim, like into saving me and expressing love for me, or that I need to be a villain because I haven't been able to work that whole hero victim thing out. I need significance, or I need attention. So I start to get big and like, right? There's not a single human being who I haven't ever met who's not been a party to those dynamics to some extent, thinking that there's something outside of them that they need in order for them to be fulfilled, thinking there's something they need in communication, in connection, in relationship from the other person in order to be happy. And yet, when we debug the programming, feel the feelings of what our ideal self is projecting, we take that layer off and we look at, where am I in pain, and where did I invent these stories, and why are they there? When I witnessed my mom have the shit beaten out of her by my father when I was a toddler, and decided that I was unworthy of love, and that my no wasn't heard, and I wasn't good enough, and I had to figure things out, and I had to make meaning of things with my mind in a way that allowed me to chess master my way through life, I also judged that I was not worthy of love without doing all of these things, without projecting an ideal self. And I built a wall around my heart, a wall around that pain, thinking that I would keep future pain out by expressing myself in these ways, hiding my real self, which was suffering, my real self, which was angry and grief-stricken and sad and broken and fractured and fragmented. So I took that 18-inch journey. I felt those feelings. And what's underneath that? What's underneath that is the true self. Is just unqualified, unconditional love and compassion and a heart of service that sees that most people have put themselves in prisons that have doors that are unlocked, that are able to be opened from the inside, if only we point people in the direction of feeling their feelings, allowing them to be there, allowing them to move and shift, and remembering the truth of who they are, the truth that they are loved, that they are worthy, that they are capable, that everything that they need is actually within them already. They don't need another course or another seminar or another training. They need merely and only and instead the ability to see through and to perceive to the true self that they are. And having done that, to bring that compassion to the world. So in my little way, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm up to. And I try to stay humble. Anyone who, like the guest before me, has been highly trained and is up to the work of bringing more love and compassion into the world, I absolutely 100% respect. As with the hosts of this, as with all of you listening, I'm sure share this commitment to bringing more of peace and love and joy and connection and excellent communication into the world. I actually also agree with Werner Erhard that there is no problem on this planet for which effective communication is not the solution, or more effective communication, right? Then it becomes a question of which languages will you use, NLP or mastery systems or earthwaking or landmark or some magnificent combination of all of them in the highest service of everyone. So anyway, that's me. I'm good. I love you all. Let's get some conversation going. How are you all?
Wow, Lewis. Wow. Well, there's so many things that you touched on that I feel each one could be an inquiry of its own, that could go in its own depth. In 30 seconds or less. No, I'm just kidding. I want to know, how does one solve, or not even solve, take a step back to the undistinguished ego and the systems, and to the systems, and what ego is created in humanity, in the collective identity. How does one confront that, an undistinguished ego, and especially like a tribalist ego, just that's built on the crowd and not on the individual? How does one take a chip away? Is there like, what's the quickest path to that?
That's a great question, and I hear two questions inside of that, so I'll distinguish both of them. Right, the tribalism, which is perhaps a emblematic reference moving towards this whole problem of like racism and not seeing that there's one human family, and then on the other side, on the micro level, so to speak, is and this is not going to be 30 seconds. This would be more like a minute. The micro level of how do I dismantle this thing that I think that I am? And the only answer I have found is breakthrough processes, is being able to feel with a rigorous and precise and committed, like unswerving determination. Like, if I'm ever not in peace, love, and joy, there's something for me to feel, and there's possibly, very likely, some belief that I have about what should be or who I should be that I get to let go of. And the more I let go of that, the more I'm dismantling the ego, which was made up in order to have me survive and to have me get along in life, and is useful to the extent that it is. And the more I have found that I practice this dismantling of, this letting go of the limiting beliefs, this feeling of the feelings, the unpacking of the pain, the more I'm able to perceive the fact that we're all one and everything's perfect and everything's working out for good, and that there's nothing that I need. The Lord is my shepherd, and there is nothing that I shall want, so to speak. And that's kind of the other piece, is that it took stepping into a certain kind of faith initially for me to believe that there was a voice of God in the soul, that there was something there to be found. As Aleister Crowley, of all people who I would quote, would say, I'm not here to tell you what you're going to find, but I am here to tell you that there is a pathway to cut through the jungle if you're interested in following out the experiments of that possibility. So that's on the micro level, discovering intuition through silencing the chattering voice and ongoing programming of unfelt feelings assembled as the ego. And then on the global level, we're always going to perceive or have the potential to perceive people as other than we are, and to distinguish differences where maybe they aren't, at least to the extent that we don't do the work to dig that up. Ibram Kendi, in the book How to Be Anti-Racist, and also in his massive historical study of racist versus anti-racist tendencies through history, he says there's been this escalating back and forth. Like, we like to think of the civil rights like we're now post-racial. We've had a black president. It's done. We're good. No, it's not. Clearly, it's for every advance taken by the Martin Luther King, there's frankly, a Donald Trump who comes. And, so perceiving how that whole dynamic of that tribalist, that racist, that judgment-based engagement, communication is still going on, or has silently inflected and infected the blueprints, the listening of you or people you care about. Like, first of all, approaching it and racists with non-judgment, releasing every bone of judgment, because that's not going to work. It's going to resist and cause to persist whatever's out there, and whoever might be open, if you've judged them as the first thing that you've said, oh, you have not done anti-racist work, that means you're a racist. Well, no, that causes white fragility to come up, and suddenly, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about that. I can't hear that. So coming to the conversation with curiosity, with compassion, but also with a profound willingness to understand that there are blind spots that are egregious, that are insanely great and deep. And this has fast become a 3 to 4 minute answer. Sorry.
Well, I know I appreciate all that. Actually, I want to bring in Paul back into the conversation with us, and I wanted to just kind of connecting the dots of what you were saying, Lewis, and what I heard what Paul was saying. It's like it is the conversation with ourselves and with the world, with God, and it's also a dance. And how, Paul, I want to ask you, how does with all that's been said so far, where does the individual lie? Where do you lie? Where do I lie? What do we do about the old conversation, and how do we create a new one?
Well, first we have to put our noticer on notice to notice other evidence that we've been ignoring or unaware of until now. For instance, I use a phrase kind of like, I used to see myself as critical. I let that go. As of now, I choose to see myself as caring. Or some other phrase. So now we get to retire the old narrative of critical, judgmental, and we put our noticer on notice to start gathering new evidence, looking in a new direction. And over time, the old meme will fade. It doesn't go away entirely. I'm still subject to my inner 5-year-old. And however, you'll start noticing your new life. And it's really it's accessed largely through language. One of the ways I coach that. So you want to recode old memes that are perhaps came into existence when you're 10 years old. And it's as easy as retiring the old, installing the new. And it's pretty simple.
I think it is that simple, and at least to me. And I feel like that's a function that rites of passage used to play in culture, especially in indigenous culture. And it's something we don't have as much of in the West. Like, there's not a rite of passage from boyhood to manhood, from girl to womanhood. There's not a rite of passage to adulthood. There's not a rite of passage to anything. And I'm not saying we need them back, but just having the awareness of the conversation you just pointed out may be enough. It's been enough for me.
A quick anecdote. A fellow came to me and said, my employee is annoying. What do I do? I said, well, if you see him as annoying, he probably sees you as an asshole. So how about we write that? We can do it in 2 steps. How about seeing him as annoying and effective? So not only is he annoying waiting to happen, you also notice his effectiveness. and therefore he sees you as still a jerk, but I can work with him. And then you take a step 2. How about getting rid of the annoying altogether and say, he's maybe a challenge to work with, but he's good for my company. Reciprocally, your employee says, well, I'll probably never raise a beer with my boss, but I'm satisfied working here. And all we did was acknowledge the old and set us up for new evidence that allows you to be in a company with good morale. No longer annoying waiting to happen, but effectiveness and a contribution to my company. And all it is, right now, we did it with words.
We manifest our reality with our subconscious belief. What is right is always available, so is what's wrong. And we choose what to focus on, and that grows and expands. It's like the story of the 2 wolves, the Cherokee story of the 2 wolves inside of us that are always doing battle. And one is greed and anger and envy and strife and fighting. The other is love and joy and peace and empowerment in our language. And which one wins? Well, whichever one you feed. Yeah.
There's a wisdom of the Buddha phrase that's very similar. Which seeds are you planting? Which seeds are you watering? And it's just a matter of, the first insight is knowing that you have power, that life doesn't happen to you, you happen to life. And that gives you a whole new access to the experience of being. And to tell the truth, some years hence, you'll get to the end of the road and there'll be a hole in the ground and they'll throw dirt in your face. No one gets out alive. Our choice is how we're going to live between now and then. Does life happen to me, or do I happen to life?
Powerful.
There's only one thing I'd like to add to that, and it kind of goes back to what Lewis was talking about earlier about intuition. And it's something that Abram and I talk about quite a bit. I have a phrase, inspiration flows from intuition. And yes, I have the power. I have the choice to choose to be whatever it is I want to be in this life. The question is, which I is making that choice? Is it the ego, the conditioned mind, the mind that has grown up in this world and has been taught how to be? Or is it that thing that is bigger than I am? Is it that divine I? And that to me is where intuition flows into it. Because that's what I define as intuition, is the divine speaking through me.
Cool.
Go ahead, Paul. Were you going to say something?
I always have something to say, but your turn.
The way that I like to express it is suppression, expression, and exquisite alignment, which you can tell probably that I stole from my conscious SEX, conscious sex and intimacy workshops. But suppression is the stage that we start from. We're in pain and sadness and suffering from programming and judgments and beliefs, and it's kind of chaotic. We can't hear. And then expression is, for me, that stage in my journey was when I did the Landmark and Just Afterwards courses, where it was like, I can have anything, I can do anything. And then the question then became, after suffering even more to a certain extent, from the pure unleashing of untrammeled potentiality, was, all right, so what do I align with? There is a highest choice for me to make in each and every moment, in alignment with my intuition. And when I make it, not only do I thrive better, but the people around me do as well, to degrees sometimes that I can't predict, imagine, understand, or plan for in my little ego. So it's like, it's being free to choose anything, because if you aren't, then you don't actually have a life to surrender to your dharma or to your intuition. So you need to go through that space first. And then from there, after recovering the life of your soul, the spark of your free will, so to speak, choosing the highest choice, because anything less than your highest choice is self-sabotage.
Okay. I admire that. And I think life's easier than you can imagine. For example, we can program the life we want in the sense of you walk down the street and you notice that someone's walking their puppy and they're having a fabulous time. And you say, gosh, I'd like some of that for myself. Now, still that exists as a possibility. There's no action involved. The moment of change, of transformation occurs when you say, I am going to be a pet owner. And in that moment, all of life changes. You program your life literally by the choice you make. And so in that moment, you say, veterinarians, poop bags, time to walk the dog, variety of dog, diets of dog, where's the dog going to live, poop places in my backyard for the dog. And all those stuff did not exist prior to your programming. You're taking on the distinction pet owner. Until the moment arrive of distinction, of choice, it was a nice idea. How sweet it looks. And after that, you just let it use you. You wake up in the morning, you naturally feed your dog. You don't have to say, I have to plan to feed my dog. Mm-hmm. Dog has you, but you're the programmer. Same thing if you were a runner, a long distance runner. You say, boy, I'd like to do a 5K. And you say, well, that's a nice possibility. But then you say, I'm going to do a 5K. And then you sign up for the 5K and you get sneakers and the diet and you train and you prepare yourself. And all those ways of being and acting arise out of your choice, out of your programming. I encourage my couples to choose together forever as their context for their lives in marriage and communication. And within the context of marriage and communication, they learn to communicate. And they don't have to think about it after a while. It becomes unconscious, but they're the programmers. And I invite them to take on a context of together forever. So we do the programming and then we let the programming guide us.
That's amazing. And it keeps popping. The Matrix keeps popping in my head.
They were graduates too.
Yeah. It's profound, you know. Every faith has some version of it, but like how powerful our word is in our own experience in our reality, but how we suffer and how we choose to not suffer is very much in honoring our word, no matter what scripture you adopt. We are creators of our word, you know, and our word has a lot of effect, whether we see it and we are authentic to ourselves, what we say we will do or not. But this has been a really amazing conversation for so many levels. And I feel like I could talk for you both for a long time about this whole issue. I feel like we should have a super council about this discussion, because it's powerful, because that's even within, I mean, just putting it all out there, this whole conversation, you can include every religion in history is trying to ask the same question: is how does one this is the foundation of spirituality, religion, but also of ultimately education, and also politics. It's how do I live? How does my family, my community live well and not suffer? And it's that's always been the puzzle of how does one contribute towards that end in an ever-changing, ever-growing, complex world where conversations are built on the very opposite of fighting against that very freedom that we that we see. And so I think I really appreciate this conversation, because it's ongoing. It's as traditions go on, the reality adapts with new conversations that evolve and that no one can predict. So it's and that's the constant question. And it's almost I would say part of that question, part of that chaos is what keeps that dance and that wheel spinning. And it's how we interact with the chaos itself is how we actually find an order. And if there was no chaos, if we were just in a situation where we were just comfortable, happy, and just, in utopia, so to speak, I feel that we would be bored and we would go back to our old ways. And it's there has to be some conflict. There has to be some kind of chaos, some kind of unknown. Without the unknown, there is no opportunity. And they're also, without risking and without some pain, there's no opportunity. And so it's standing. And I want to finish, because I really appreciate these conversations, I want to finish with something, another quote I heard. It's about, and it's the same. It's about, ultimately, it's about love and fear, and fear. Like I was listening to someone speak earlier today at a meeting I was in, and he said he's a single dad for 5 children, and he said every time his children were afraid, this is what he always taught them. He says, like, they're like, "Daddy, I'm afraid," and he would say, "That's okay, do it afraid." And it's like, fear is not something that, like, we have experienced fear, we have fear, but we aren't fear. Fear is, it's like, if we can do so, we can experience fear and still take action despite that fear. We are not the emotion. We are only the vessel carrying it. And I'm so inspired by everything that was shared by you, Paul, by you, Lewis. Like, this is a beautiful conversation. And I'd like to, because this has been epic, I just want to let everyone have a moment, just really quick, to any final thoughts.
Well, thanks for having me. I look forward to even another opportunity, and I'll embrace any opportunity to be in communication, because that's what I do. I would just say that they say that light exists as a particle and as a wave. And what would be if we are particles and our living is the wave? So my blessing for you is long may you wave.
Beautiful. Lewis, how about you?
I also would never pass up an opportunity to be in communication, to be in communication in service of this mission, this organization, as well as the implicit intention of all communication, which is love. When we're doing the work of a communications course, for example, to restore affinity to people we haven't spoken to in a couple of years, it's to plug back in to the flow of love between me and you that's always already there. And so I want to invite you all to notice and distinguish that in your living as a wave, that your wave goes out from you, and that your wave is in fact all who you impact, and that full embrace of being that means indeed being in communication, being a standing wave of transformation wherever you go.
Okay. Matthew, any last words?
Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate both your voices and what you both stand for. And I put the intention out there that this conversation is a beacon, that it serves as a beacon to bring more people into communication and relationship and love and intuition, and go right back to that question of what is the authentic self.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Beautiful. I'm really grateful for both of you being here, and I want to have you both come back soon, and we'll continue where we left off. This has been awesome. This has been a really great, amazing talk, and I'm lifted and elated right now. I feel energized just from this is what I live for. This conversation right here, because it's ongoing, and it's amazing to hear you both speak your mind about and your hearts about this. But I'd like to thank our listeners and our watchers viewing with us today. This has been a really awesome experience for me, and I hope you gained something out of our conversation today. One day we want to invite you to share your unique gift. We want you to share who you are. We want your voice. We want you to be part of this conversation, and it's my pleasure to invite you to this open space to share yourself and share who you are. None of this is possible without you sharing and continuing to keep the conversation going. When you share yourself and your story, we see ourselves, and it makes us all see how we're way more connected than our conversations of these old conversations that we have and we propagate and we continue. But this is your time to share who you are, and I really would encourage you, and I would be so blessed to have you and to have you share your voice with us. But this is all contributing to what our one-day vision is, which is humanity rising in a connected world with each person's unique contributions being valued and magnified through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. Thank you all for tuning in. I love you all. We'll see you on Thursday. I hope you stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you